Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But if you thought that was too scary, then just wait until you hear the stories I found for you tonight. Like this one, for example. It's about a ghost that had something against a particular decoration they had hanging up. It's called, "A Ghost Didn't Like the Decoration."
This is probably such a lame story, but it still baffles my whole family to this day. I'm from Germany, where people aren't particularly inclined to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. Germans generally prefer logical explanations for strange events, and don't really embrace things like Halloween or horror movies. So, when something weird happens, the usual response is a shrug and, "It is what it is." That's why it's so surprising that even my family ended up saying, "Okay, maybe it was a ghost." I grew up in a very old house. My parents still live there, actually. It dates back to the 1910s, though the interior has been renovated several times. Despite the updates, the house still has a spooky vibe, especially at night. I remember how many of my childhood friends were too scared to go to the bathroom after dark. It became a bit of a running joke. Over the years, small, strange things would happen. Magnets would fall off the fridge for no reason. Pictures would tumble from the walls. But we'd just brush it off, muttering, it is what it is. Then one night, something happened that we just couldn't explain. My mom had this steel sign in the kitchen. It was one of those funny ones that said, "You take 1 glass of wine and pour it into the cook." She kept it at the far end of the kitchen counter, where it was completely secure. No way it could have fallen on its own. One night, about 10 years ago, we all heard a loud metallic clatter. The next morning, we noticed the sign was missing. It wasn't on the counter. It wasn't on the floor. It hadn't fallen behind the counter either. Our counters are sealed to the wall with silicone, so that was impossible. It was just gone. For years, my parents couldn't find that sign. My mom would occasionally joke, "The ghost took it. I think this house might be haunted." It became one of those funny but baffling family stories that we'd laugh about, but never understood. Fast forward to last year. My parents had to replace their dishwasher, so they pulled the old one out. And guess what they found? The steel sign. It was lying behind the dishwasher. Here's the thing. The dishwasher was on the other side of the kitchen. The counters are sealed, and there's no logical way the sign could have moved across the room and ended up there. To this day, we have no idea how it happened. Maybe the ghost didn't like the sign. Who knows? I get that it's not the most thrilling ghost story, but sometimes it's the little, inexplicable things that stick with you.
Oh, I don't know. It sounded pretty cute to me. Maybe the ghost was just a teetotaler. Next, we've got one from a woman that tells of a family ghost that wasn't just seen by one person, but by two. It's called the double confirmation ghost sighting.
Here is my best retelling of our family's double confirmation ghost sighting of my grandfather. I grew up with 3 sisters and my mom and dad in Buffalo, New York. My whole extended family lives here too. We are very close and tight-knit. My parents would host both set of my grandparents every Saturday night for dinner and cards. My maternal grandpa was on oxygen, smoker, for a couple years with major lung and heart issues. Before dessert and cards, he would sit on our golden love chair in our living room with both his arms resting on the sides and oxygen tank near his feet. At the end of 2006, he passed peacefully, and we all miss him dearly. A couple months after his funeral, my mom badly hurt her back, went to the doctor, and was prescribed pain medication. My mom is not the type to complain, but this injury had her down and out like we've never seen before. She said it was the worst pain of her life and took her pills as prescribed. She began sleeping on the couch at night in our living room, as it was the only way she could get semi-comfortable. The medicine wasn't cutting her pain, and she began dreaming about how she just wanted a break from the pain. She wasn't sure she'd ever get better again. She awoke to a voice coming from the other side of the living room that said, "Donna, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through this." She turned and saw her dad in the golden chair, oxygen tank and all. She was not afraid at all, but she couldn't believe her eyes. She turned back over and convinced herself she was affected by the medication and went back to sleep. The same night, my oldest sister was out late partying with her friends. The front porch light was on, and the family rule, Mom was a stickler, was to turn it off if you were the last to come home. Sister stumbled into the house and was going to turn the light off, but she saw my grandfather with his oxygen tank on our golden chair. He was watching over my mom on the couch and never broke eye contact off my mom. She internally freaked out and ran to her bedroom, convincing herself she was hallucinating. Fast forward to the morning. 5 of us are at the breakfast table just chatting, and my oldest sister walks into the kitchen for breakfast. My mom says to her, "Jennifer, you forgot to turn off the porch light last night." My sister looks at my mom and goes, "Mom, I wasn't going to say anything, but when I got home last night, I saw Grandpa on the golden couch with his oxygen tank looking at you, and it really freaked me out." My mom dropped her spoon, gasped, and said, "Jennifer, me too."
Well, as parents, it's our job to watch out for our kids, and that job is a never-ending one. It doesn't even end when our life does. Before we get into our next tale, I just want to take a moment to remind you to, assuming your hands are not trembling with terror at the moment, hit like and subscribe. It'll really raise our spirits, so to speak. And if you don't, I swear I'll come and haunt your house. I'll rattle chains at all hours of the night, yell boo while you're trying to sleep. I'll raid your fridge, and I'll, try on all your clothes and stuff. Just a lot of scary stuff. Our next one just goes to show you that not all ghost encounters are terrifying, especially if the ghost is just visiting the grandkids.
I never met my father-in-law. He passed away 5 years before I met my wife. If he were alive today, he would have 9 grandchildren, including my kids. However, he only got to meet 2 of them in his lifetime. There is a framed picture that my wife keeps on her nightstand next to her side of the bed of him dancing with her when she was 15 or 16. They are both looking at the camera, his head tilted back a little, with a larger-than-life smile. It is one of those pictures that brings a smile to your face, even if you do not know the person in it. There is a copy of that picture and many similar ones at my mother-in-law's house. They all have the same theme, him and his contagious smile. By all accounts, he was always the life of the party, would get people to dance and be cheerful. He was also a devoted family man, and he was thankful that he got to enjoy time with his 2 granddaughters while battling the disease that eventually took him away. Fast forward 18 years. All the grandkids are home, including the 2 oldest ones, who now live away to attend college. We had a potluck at my mother-in-law's home, and my kids were just thrilled to see their older cousins. Although the age gap between the oldest kid and the youngest is 15 years, they all get along well, and the oldest ones are just sweethearts about playing and entertaining their younger relatives. At my eldest child's insistence, we invited all 9 kids for a sleepover at our house. We ordered pizza and set up a bunch of air mattresses and video games for the kids to enjoy in my daughter's bedroom. Of course, no adults were allowed. Just some background information. My house was built in 2014 on empty land, and it was rented out to a couple of families before us, so there is no weird history there. The layout of the house has 3 bedrooms upstairs. As soon as you come up from the stairs, there is the master bedroom to the right and the other 2 bedrooms to the left. If the master bedroom door is open, you get a clear view of our bed as soon as you hit the upstairs landing. Likewise, if you are in my bed, you can see whoever is coming up the stairs. That evening, after the kids shut themselves up in their pajama party, my wife was doing chores while I was watching TV from my bed. I normally close my door when I watch TV, as I am very conscious about my kids not being exposed to content inappropriate for their age. However, as my wife kept coming in and out of the bedroom, she just left the door open at some point. I'm not sure about the exact time. It must have been 9 or 10 p.m. when I noticed someone coming up the stairs. It was not a shadow, it was not a see-through figure. I was a person, with the sound of the steps and everything. As soon as the person got to the landing, I could fully see him and realize that it was my father-in-law. My deceased father-in-law. He was not scary or disfigured like a zombie on TV. He looked exactly like the guy in the picture. And he had that smile, that disarming smile. Surprised, I have had my fair share of paranormal encounters. I just stared at him for a while and then decided to greet him aloud. Hello, mister, how are you? Stupid question, he could have come back with a burn and replied, unalive. He had that kind of humor from what I have been told. I'm fine, thank you. I am here to visit the kids, he replied in what I assume was his voice, since I had never met him or seen videos of him. Okay, I said. He just nodded and moved over towards the kids' bedroom. I did not hear anyone screaming in the bedroom, so I figured I was the only one who saw him. I paused the show and debated whether to tell my wife about what had just transpired. She gets really freaked out when these things happen to me, and she is still overly sensitive about her father. However, her supernatural ability is to see right through me, so she could tell that something was up. I decided to tell her straight up what happened. She followed with an avalanche of questions, but she was quite calm about it. I told her what he looked like, what he was wearing, and his demeanor. I also told her that we both had spoken aloud as far as I knew, and that I heard his voice. It had not been some sort of mental conversation. His lips even moved and everything. Tears began rolling, and as I comforted her, she began crying about her frustration of not being the one who had seen him, since she was his daughter after all. I had no reply for that, other than to share the genuine feeling that I got from him, that he loved them and watched over them. My wife calmed down after a few minutes and then went to bed. She asked me not to say anything to the kids or the in-laws. I was ahead of her in that sentiment. We ended up telling them later, and they all shared stories about how they, at some point or another, felt his presence, but nothing with the certainty that I was relating. I was glad to have met him, and I believe that we would have gotten along very well. I caught a glimpse of the feeling that everyone who knew him shares about him, that he was a kind, warm, fun-loving person. I hope my children, his grandchildren, share those traits and values.
Wow, what a coincidence. Your wife and mine has the same supernatural ability. My wife can see right through me too. Of course, since my passing, I guess most people can see right through me. Well, will you look at the time? I guess it's true what they say about time flying when you're having the bejesus scared out of you. But we do have time for one more. It's about a trip a wife and her husband took with some friends, a trip that she won't soon forget. It's called Shadow Man in Telluride.
I've always been curious about ghosts, but am a healthy skeptic and knew that if there really is something to it, I'd never be convinced unless it actually happened to me. It wasn't until my 30s that I had an experience, and it was 100% unequivocal. On an annual trip to Telluride, we were staying in a very nice condo in Mountain Village, right beside the gondola. In the past, we'd stayed at our friend's place, but because there were more in our group this time, she had arranged for us to also have the neighbor's condo next door. So we all spread out over the two condos next to each other. The building is rustic in style with high-end finishes, very comfortable. The additional space was equally beautiful and well-furnished. Our group started settling in. My husband and I were offered the master bedroom in the second condo. As we brought in our luggage, I immediately noticed a difference between our room and the rest of the space. It was more of a visual difference than a feeling. The large room was furnished with a king-size bed, but conspicuously, the only thing on the expansive wall above the bed was a small, probably 8-inch tall, wooden cross. The item was way too small in scale for the wall. Every other wall of the condo was hung with art and the usual decor pieces, so I noticed the difference right away. I think I pointed it out to my husband that it was an odd choice. As we unpacked, I looked for a place to store my suitcase and saw that our bed was actually built into the floor. Instead of space under the bed, it was a locked owner's compartment. Slightly unusual, but a creative use of space. I joked to my husband that it's a great place to keep your skis. Or hide a body. That first night we all got settled. We shared a bathroom with other friends who slept in a second bedroom with built-in bunks. We hung out in the common area and stayed up late playing games and drinking wine. The next morning we were shocked to wake up to one of our friends holding a washcloth to her face. It was soaked with blood. In the early hours, she'd apparently gotten up to use the bathroom and somehow slipped and hit her forehead on the sharp corner of a baseboard. My husband took her immediately to an urgent care where they called in a surgeon to stitch her up. We blamed her fall on wearing socks on wood floors plus a late night, but she joked that someone must have pushed her. We had an amazing day skiing and exploring the village afterwards. Everyone was tired, so we were in bed before midnight. My husband was already asleep next to me. The room was dark except for my phone screen and a little light shining through the blinds from the lift outside. I had just put my phone down and closed my eyes when I heard a sound, a metallic clicking. From where I was lying, I couldn't see the door, it was out of view down the short entryway to the room. But I recognized the sound of the doorknob turning, followed by the door slowly creaking open. My immediate thought was that one of our friends was coming to get us up for drinking games, so I held still and kept silent, planning to pretend to be asleep. But as the figure moved into the room and into my view, I quickly realized it was the shadow of a large man. The only male staying in our condo was my husband, so I assumed this must be another friend's husband from the other condo next door. We didn't know him very well, so I was surprised and livid that he had just let himself into our room so brazenly. I started to sit up to ask what the hell he was doing when the form passed the foot of the bed and in front of the windows, where I realized all at once that I could see through him. The light from the blinds was slightly visible through the dark form. I could see the definite shape of a man, and he even appeared to be wearing a black long-sleeve thermal with a black t-shirt on top. At the same time, I realized the shadow form didn't have a face, it was just a dark hollow in the head. The shadow moved very quickly and purposefully around the bed to the side where my husband was sleeping. It bent down aggressively very close to his face. It seemed to have something in its hand, and I panicked, sure that we were being physically attacked. A loud growling voice exploded in my head. It shouted, "Get out!" I tried to scream, but the sound came out slow and guttural. If you've ever had a dream where you try to speak or shout and can't, where your voice just won't work and seems to be stuck in slow-mo. That's how it felt. I lunged toward my husband and shook him awake. Right away he started trying to calm me down and tell me I'd been dreaming. The figure was gone, but the growling voice was still shouting over and over again, "Get out! Get out! Get out!" My husband obviously wasn't hearing it. He flipped on the light and the voice stopped. I quickly explained what happened and could see it freaked him out, but he hadn't heard or seen anything. We put the TV on for some background noise and left the light on. The rest of that night, just as I would start to fall asleep, the voice would come back to scream in my head, "Get out!" I finally spoke out loud to the room that we would leave in the morning. Eventually, I fell asleep. True to our word, we packed up the next morning and moved our stuff to the other condo. This had been the plan anyway, as some of our group were leaving and we consolidated. Exiting the room now, I looked at the solitary cross above the bed and wondered if we were not the first to be tormented in this room. I also thought about the locked compartment under the bed and the joke I'd made. It all seemed a whole lot creepier now. Retelling the story over lunch at Gorono, most were entertained and not too concerned. The owners of the condo spent the majority of the year at home in Switzerland, and they had never mentioned anything weird happening. Then someone remembered how our friend who fell said she was pushed, and the mood shifted a bit. It freaked me out the most. If shadow people could open a door and push, what else could they do? What could it have done? Maybe that little cross did protect us in a small way.
Let that be a lesson to y'all. If a ghost yells at you to get out, then you better listen. I mean, hasn't the Amityville horror taught us anything? Well, I think I've done enough damage to your nerves for one night. But, before you leave, could you do me a little favor? Could you please hit like, subscribe, and share this video? It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, or have anything you'd like to tell me at all, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.